In this video, you're going to discover 7 strategies to help you master time management as a CEO so that you can spend less time working in the business and more time on what truly matters. If you're new here, my name is Byron Morrison. I'm the author of The Effective CEO. I help first-time CEOs become the leader their business needs to take it to the next level of success. So make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. Every week I speak to CEOs who tell me there's never enough minutes in the day to get everything done. When we really break down what they're doing though, so much of their time is spent stuck in the weeds, solving other people's problems or working on tasks that aren't actually a good use of their time. And this is a huge issue because when you're growing and scaling a company, everything you do has a cost. Every hour you spend in one thing is an hour that could be spent in something else. That's why if you want to master time management as a CEO, the first thing you need to figure out is what you should actually be doing with your days. I talk about this in depth in my book, The Effective CEO 2.0, but essentially what you need to do is answer 3 questions. The first is, what is your zone of genius? The second is, where does your time have the greatest impact? And the third is, what can only be done by you? By figuring this out, that's going to help you clearly define your role and responsibilities. And from there, you can make better decisions about what you actually choose to take on. That takes us to strategy number 1, auditing the past. What I want you to do is to look back over the last 2 to 3 weeks at everything you did. Go back through your calendar, your emails, or however you manage your time, and really brutally be honest with yourself with everything you did. Was this a good use of your time? Did this drive the business forward, or could this have been done by someone else? What you're aiming to do here is get insights about the tasks that are not a good use of your time, energy, or bandwidth, because from there you can create what I call a not to-do list. This is essentially a list of the meetings, the events, the tasks, or projects that going forward you're going to commit to no longer being involved in. From there, strategy number 2 is then to shift the focus from the past to the present and the future. What you need to do before you even think about planning every single week is to go through your to-do list and all of your tasks and really ask yourself, is this actually important? As in, will getting this done get you closer to your goals or targets or KPIs? If the answer is no, then you need to delete it. If the answer is yes, then does this need to be done by you? If the answer is no, who could you then delegate it to? Whenever I do these 2 audits with my private clients, they always free up hours every single week. Like a call I had recently where by just focusing on the future-based audit, the CEO realized he had over 4 hours of commitments that week that he shouldn't have been taking on. This is why my average client, when we add everything on top, frees up anything from 5 to 15 hours a week. That's time they can then spend creating more impact, driving more revenue, and living a life of freedom on their terms. And that's why I want you to make this a non-negotiable task you take every single week, because you'll be amazed at how much time you're able to get back. Strategy number 3 is to schedule time for high-value work. A few years ago, I was working with a CEO who came to me during a period of explosive growth. They were currently scaling and they were about to do another fundraise. Because of that, most of his time needed to be spent doing pitches, writing presentations, and building relationships with investors. The way he was approaching his days was by following the standard productivity advice. He'd create a to-do list, figure out his priorities, and then dive in. Now, on paper, this sounds like sound advice. The problem is, though, that practices like this can be catastrophic if you want to be a highly effective CEO. The reason being is they're far too short-sighted. They're generally based around what's important that day without really factoring in your bigger vision and what you need to achieve. And that was the exact situation this client was finding himself in, because he had so many competing priorities that if he was lucky by 2-3 p.m., he'd maybe get an hour to then focus on fundraising. Only by then, he'd be mentally drained and exhausted, so he wouldn't have the energy or focus needed to do these tasks effectively. And this was a huge problem, because if he didn't secure the next raise, there wasn't going to be daily fires and challenges to get pulled back into. That was why for him, we needed to take a far more long-term and top-level approach. We needed to figure out how many hours did he need each week for his high-value tasks. For him, we calculated that needed to be around 15 hours. We then needed to look at what did he need energy and bandwidth wise in order to execute on them properly. Knowing himself, he worked best in the morning. It's when he was creative and in a state of flow. So knowing all of that, what we did is we blocked out 9 until 12 every single day for high value work. It was communicated to the team that he wasn't going to be available, he wasn't checking messages or emails, and he would start his day moving forward these tasks. He'd then take some lunch, take a break, and then go into the to-do list for everything else. By taking this more structured approach, this is how he could defend his time and really prioritize his bigger picture tasks. This is why you need to get far more clear on how much time you need each week for your high value work, and then you need to structure it accordingly. To take it a step further though, you also need to be highly defensive with this time, because if you don't, something is always going to seem more important in the moment, and you're going to find yourself constantly sacrificing your long-term goals for short-term crises. Strategy number 4 is to structure your weeks around 2 different types of days. Effective days, where you drive growth to your high value work and move the business forward, and efficient days, where you do meetings, admin tasks, and just keep the business running. What I find is that most overwhelmed CEOs have far too many efficient days and not enough effective days. And this is why they're always stuck in the trenches working in the business instead of on it. I saw this with one of my CEO clients where he would just have Mondays, an example of back-to-back meetings, but he'd also then go into the day with this huge to-do list of what he needed to get done. As a result, he would never get around to any of it, and he would just end the day feeling like he was behind, beating himself up. So we restructured his weeks accordingly, where he had all of his meetings on a Monday. That would be an efficient day. Then we defended Tuesday and Wednesday as an effective day, where he blocked off time for high value work. By having this distinction between the 2 days, it took a huge amount of pressure off him, because he could then be at peace with Mondays not being a day that he's going to drive anything forward. By getting all of that done on that day though, it then set him up for the rest of the week ahead. This is why you really need to start judging your productivity based on what you get done over the course of a week, not just a day. Because if you just judge a day in isolation, it's always going to feel like you're not doing enough, or you should be doing more. Strategy number 5 is to schedule time every single day to wrap up and keep on top of everyday tasks. Because I find with the CEOs I work with, one of their biggest challenges is balancing all their competing priorities with the things they need to keep on top of every single day. Stuff like emails and messages and admin tasks that just piles up in the background. As a result, they always feel like they're behind, so they find themselves having to work late to try and catch up on everything they need to get done. Because of that, one of my favorite strategies to get around this is to schedule the last hour of every single day as time that you use to catch up on everything else. You really need to defend this and be strict with yourself and viewing it as time to respond to emails, deal with messages, and everything else that needs your attention. By building this into your calendar, you can then really balance your short-term commitments with everything else, and it makes it a lot easier to stay up to date with everything that needs your attention. Strategy number 6 is to set clear expectations. With the CEOs I work with, one of the biggest things to derail their day is other people. It's like when someone asks you for 5 minutes and it turns into a 20-minute conversation, or you're in endless meetings that overrun, leaving you late for everything else. The way that you resolve this is by actually communicating expectations of what you have available, because if you give someone an hour, they're going to talk for an hour, whereas if you give them 5 minutes, they're going to be far more focused and honed in. That's why whether it's a conversation, going into a meeting, or something else, you have to be clear on what your availability is. Say to someone, look, this is how much time I have, this is when I have a hard stop, and then be strict with moving on to something else. If it then needs further time for a resolution, reschedule it based on something that works on your agenda. Because if you don't get this right, either you're going to spend your days constantly in a reactive state, bouncing around from one thing to the next, or you're going to keep going into days with a clear plan and intention that you're allowed to get derailed by everything else. Start setting clear expectations though, and it'll be easier to defend your days and prioritize what you need to get done. Strategy number 7 is to take some time each day to reflect on what you did and what disrupted your time. Because when you're running a business and you're stuck in the trenches, it's easy to get in a cycle where your focus is just on getting through the day. The thing is though, if you don't take time to reflect on what you did, you're going to miss huge insights and opportunities of how you could become more effective in what you're doing. That means just take a few minutes at the end of each day, look back and really think about what wasn't a good use of your time? What disrupted your day or distracted you? What boundaries do you need to put in place going forward? The few minutes that you take here to reflect could save you hours every single week. From helping CEOs in 18 different countries to become more effective in their role though, what I've seen time and time again is that the biggest risk to their time management is themselves. It's because they overload themselves and take far too much on. It's because they're not clear on their priorities, meaning they get pulled into tasks they shouldn't. It's because they're not effectively delegating, holding their team accountable and ensuring that they're following through, and because they're not setting the right boundaries and defending their time. And this is why if you really want to become more effective in your role, then what you need to develop is your own leadership skills and capabilities. This is a big part of the reason why I developed the Evolve program, to help CEOs become the leader their business needs to take it to the next level of success. So if you want to maximize your time, lead with confidence, and ultimately grow a business without losing your sanity, then this may be for you. I'll drop a link in the description of this video where you can find out more about the Evolve program and see if it's right for you. So there you have it, 7 strategies to master time management as a CEO. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you give it a like and let me know in the comments which of these strategies you're going to implement today. Also, obviously, one thing involved in time management that we didn't really touch on is effective planning. That's because I've got a whole video that goes through the effective CEO planning process that I use with all of my private clients, and I'll link it at the end. As I said at the beginning, I've been Byron Morrison. If you enjoyed this video, then hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.